Bojo and hello, I'm James and I'll be your host for this season of the Everyday Forum podcast, an original Stratfest at Home podcast showcasing a sampling of the thought-provoking discussions from the Stratford Festival's 2025 Meighen Forum, the festival within the festival designed to enhance and contextualize the performances in the main Stratford Festival season. The following discussion was recorded in front of a live audience in Lazaretus Hall at the Tom Patterson Theatre in Stratford, Ontario, Canada. Enjoy! Bonjour and good morning, everyone. My name is James Hyatt. I'm the Associate Coordinator of the Forum. I'm very grateful that you've all made it here to this morning's panel titled In Pursuit of Bears, Shakespeare and Animal Metaphors. I've really been looking forward to this one ever since we sort of came up with the idea last year. As some of you who've been here before may know, the idea of the Peer into the Playbill series is to take themes relevant to the playbill and sort of find people that can talk about those themes. Sometimes we don't look at themes, we look at really specific stage directions, as is the case today with Exit Pursued by a Bear, of course, from The Winter's Tale, for anyone that hadn't made that connection but bought a ticket anyhow. Now, before I pass it over to our panel here to talk about nature, I'd like to talk about nature briefly, in acknowledging the land, naturally. In a couple weeks, it's the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. This is a day when, we think about the calls to action and the work done by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, which concluded their work a decade ago this year, in 2015. They issued several calls to action to various institutions across the country to forward reconciliation with Indigenous people. So, in that spirit, I'd like to acknowledge the land, thank it for literally holding us up. It's underneath us right now. It's important. I'd like to acknowledge the plants and animals that inhabit the land, provide us shelter and food, including the bears, of course, and for all the great things they do. The bugs, the fish, the birds, the water that feeds the land as well, and the sky for looking over us, as well as the Indigenous nations that have cared for this land for generations. That's the nations of the Neutral Confederacy and the Mississaugas and other Anishinaabe nations. So immediately to my right here is Kel Piro. Kel holds a PhD in Renaissance English literature and was an actor for 20 years. She's a founding member of Ottawa's Plosive Productions and currently runs KMP and Associates Creative Communications, through which she works as a writer, editor, and translator. Welcome, Kel.
Thank you.
Next to Kel is Martyn Obbard, an emeritus research scientist with 32 years experience with the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources, including 28 in the wildlife research section studying polar bears and black bears in Ontario, as well as an adjunct professor in the Environmental and Life Sciences graduate program at Trent University. He is a member of the International Union for Conservation of Nature Species Survival Commission's Polar Bear Specialist Group, and in retirement, Martyn has led small group tours to Churchill, Manitoba for polar bear viewing and has participated in several expedition cruises to the Northwest Passage in the Canadian Arctic and to the Svalbard region and the European Arctic. Welcome, Martyn. Next to Martyn is John Kretzu. John has enjoyed an over 40-year career as a director, dramaturge, professor, and fine arts correspondent all over the United States. His directing work covers a multitude of genres, from Shakespeare to Sondheim, reimagined classics to world premieres, musical theatre to opera. John directed As You Like It for the Birmingham Conservatory at the Stratford Festival, and he continues to direct, consult, and teach for various theatres, and has recently written his first full-length screenplay. Welcome, John. And at the end of the line there, our moderator for today is Graham Abbey, who is playing Banquo in Macbeth and Leontes in The Winter's Tale this year. Graham is a Canadian film, television, and stage actor who has been at Stratford Festival for 26 seasons and is the artistic director of Groundling Theatre. Welcome, Graham.
Thanks, James, and thank you all for coming this morning. Who knew that bears were so popular? This is the festival has to program more bear activities. James, that reminds me, I had a Q&A once with a student audience, and anyone have any question? And a little girl put up her hand. She stood up. She's like, "Do you like my pants?" Which is valid. I mean, it's a good question. Thank you all for being here. This panel, yes, it excites me a great deal. Bears are near and dear to my heart in the theater world and the plays I'm doing this year. I also was an avid teddy bear collector, and we'll get into that later. But when I first met this panel, we had a little Zoom, and I thought, oh gosh, and ideas just flew, and we got down a million areas on bears. So I hope we can contain this inside the hour we've got, and I'm sure there will be many questions from you. I want to begin because we're at the Stratford Shakespeare Festival, and Shakespeare's been my world with sort of beginning in the area of Shakespeare and bears. So bears come up a lot in these plays, the most famous being Exit Pursued by a Bear and Winter's Tale this year. Bears were a major part of Shakespeare's world. They're not so much a part of ours, but I want to start, John, with you because you've directed this play several times and why we're so fascinated with this Exit Pursued by a Bear, and what was Shakespeare, why was there a bear in there? Does it have something to do with the meaning in the play, or was it simply that that they would have known bears and the audience, it would have been available? I don't know. Is there a deeper meaning to it, I guess?
I think all of the above.
Yeah.
It's also interesting because Shakespeare doesn't put in that many stage directions. Mm-hmm. So to have this one and it's such an unusual one, is quite extraordinary. I also think it's really a great example of just how much of an avant-garde genius Shakespeare was, because the bear serves, in my thinking, as the transition in the play between the tragic first half of the play and ending with this tragic death of Antigonus. But then seconds later, the young shepherd talks about what he discovers and usually gets quite a lot of laughs. And it's written in almost an exaggerated, funny way. And so he's making the transition from the tragedy of the first half to the romantic comedy of Bohemia in such a subtle and fascinating and so theatrical a fashion. So that's, for me, what it's about.
Is there something deeper in it? I know when we tackled it in Toronto, and the brilliant Brent Carver, who played this role, and had lots of thoughts about the protective spirit of the bear becoming something that's larger than that in fact Antigonus sacrifices himself to protect that child, and in effect, the spirit of the bear, which is so linked to so many models of protection and spirituality, becomes that aura around Perdita to save the child.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and I can give you some good examples.
I love
it. Including one that's happening right now, the RSC production that's happening right now in Stratford on Avon, is doing a fascinating thing that I didn't find in any of my research, in which the bear is played by Hermione, who wears a bear mask, who comes in and stops the action, saves her own baby by taking on the role of the bear. And that's pretty fascinating. And then there's another very interesting production, the Adrian Noble production, where the bear came in, looked at the baby, was fascinated, started to kind of play with it. He was really interested. And then he got hungry. And he started to go for the bear. And at that point, a vision of Hermione came in and put her hand up and stopped him. And that's when he turned and saw Antigonus and went, oh, okay, I'll have him. So that's some examples of that.
That's amazing. Marty, when we chatted, you brought up this notion of Shakespeare being so specific about the area of the person that the bear ate, right? We talk about it tearing out of a shoulder bone or something. Let's get into the real bears. And is there something specific about that? Would bears go after that part of the body, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, that struck me as A, odd, and B, as you said, very specific. We know from our history of evidence of bear attacks that they quite often attack the head. But the fact that it mentions that tore out the shoulder blade did strike me as odd. So in some of the research I did, looking at archaeological finds of bear remains, one of the papers I read speculated about something called scapulomancy. And apparently it's still a thing in parts of Central Europe where people look at a scapula, shoulder blade, and they look at striations on it and they attempt to foretell the future. So there's this divination. So I don't know whether there's any Shakespeare had anything suggesting that or not, but it did strike me as odd because it's such a specific reference that tore out the shoulder blade, and then later on, who's the character who's pulled up by the arm and says my shoulder blade is out.
Autolycus later,
Yeah.
fakes an injury. You're right. Yeah, so the
right.
shoulder blade comes back.
So,
yeah.
what to make of that,
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's to me, it was an odd and very specific reference that Shakespeare made. So,
So what's interesting to me about that and what you're saying, John, is that the bear, this sort of notion of bears being liminal figures, that they exist at the edge of our civilized society and wilderness. We'll get into that in literature, but also it's a turning point in the play, and what you're getting at with the shoulder bone and the future is very interesting. I like to think Shakespeare didn't miss anything. So this notion of the shoulder bone being a part of death, but also a divination of something turning towards the future is really, really, really fascinating.
He knew everything, face it.
Kel, let's talk a little bit about if you can, bears in Shakespeare's time, because we don't see them much anymore. I mean, Marty does, but most of us don't see them in our backyards. We see them at zoos, hopefully in respectful spots, but Shakespeare's audience would have known them and went to the South Side bear baiting.
Yes,
thing, right?
there weren't any wild bears by Shakespeare's time in England, but there were bears. There were bear wards, as they were called, people who kept bears that were trained for dancing and for bear baiting, which was a quite popular pastime. And indeed, some of the bear pits tended to be in the same area as the theatres, whereas this, I was mentioning earlier at one point, I don't know who it was, but somebody had lodged a complaint that the theatre was taking away business from the bear baiting. So,
I read often, like you guys come to a forum and then go see a show, they would go to a bear baiting and then go to one of Shakespeare's plays.
because they, a lovely afternoon of seeing a bear tormented and then going to the theatre. It's great.
Sure, yeah.
But so they did. There was actually, there were some famous bears who, including one named Sackerson, who was, they tended to be named after their keepers, their owners. John Sackerson, sometimes Seckerston, had an inn called the Bear. And he had a number of bears that were kept, and there would be kind of traveling bear shows, I guess you'd say, into the provinces at certain times of year, so that it wasn't just people in London who could see them. And it was a fairly kind of diplomatic, much like the theatre. There were people of all different classes who would attend this, and people with dogs, because what bear baiting consisted of was you had a bear that was tied to a stake, and you usually had a bunch of dogs having a go at it. So blood sport in a quite literal sense that is horrifying to us now. But it was so popular that even when the theatres were suppressed in 1642, the Puritans did not approve of bear baiting, not having anything to do with animal welfare, simply because they thought it was corrupting young men, and people enjoyed it, so why wouldn't they want to suppress it?
And you would gamble on it.
You would gamble
betting,
on it too. Yeah, they were really worried about its corrupting effect. But bear baiting, kept on. And so there was quite a lot of money in it. Of course, it took a lot of money to keep a bear and to train a bear. But a lot of people had dogs. And in fact, they went through a lot of dogs. There was archaeological work done near in one of the areas of London where this was going on. And the number of bones, dog bones in particular, rather large breeds for England at the time. And because this was kind of officially sanctioned, if a man went out and you had a fine-looking dog and it wanted that dog, it was going to take that dog for bear baiting. It was that kind of serious a thing. So it was something certainly that I think Shakespeare's audience would have been very familiar with. And it went on. It didn't go on during the interregnum. It was stopped, but it wasn't officially outlawed until the 1830s with the Animal Cruelty Act. Yes.
Wow.
So, there were, and the same with dog fights. Bull baiting was a similar instance with that. And in fact, right now in South Carolina, they are trying to, I think, to get outlawed. I don't think they've succeeded yet. Something called bear baying, which is training dogs for bear hunt, because of course bears are hunted in many places. But there are people who have bears that they raise. They do have these bears in an enclosed area, and the dogs bay at them, and it's essentially a way of trying to train a dog how to kind of corner and help restrain a bear without getting killed. And of course, there are many complaints that the dogs, even though they're not supposed to physically make contact with the bear, they do. So that's going on right now, in a way that bear hunters claim is very important for safe bear hunting. But at any rate, bears have been involved in blood sports for a long time. And it certainly would have been something that Shakespeare's world knew.
And not to get into the gory details of it, but effectively, because I had heard about bear baiting for years and kind of looked up last night, but because you say tied to a stake, of course that line's in Macbeth. They've tied me to a stake. I cannot fly. I'm allowed to say it because I've played it, but that's a reference to being kind of chained and surrounded. But the bear would be declawed, as I understand, and so because. And Marty, you can tune in on this, but if the bear had all its claws and stuff, it would make short work of a dog, I think, or several dogs.
Depending on how many dogs were setting on it, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Marty, any thoughts?
Yeah, and from the real world, there's pretty good evidence that bears don't like dogs, and that comes from the fact that from time to time wolves attack bears and packs of wolves and injure them or kill them. They've actually attacked bears in dens and so on. So, it just occurred to me when Cal was speaking in there that presumably Shakespeare would have seen bear baiting. He may, in fact, have seen a dog severely injured by a bear. So maybe that's where the exposed shoulder blade idea comes from. I don't really know. But certainly, pretty good evidence that bears don't like cane.
And there were famous bears that would, of course, survive. If they survived several of these baitings, they would become kind of famous. I think there were a couple named bears that were famous.
Sackerson was the
big one.
They were like gladiators. They're essentially there's a lot of gladiatorial combat there.
So let's get into a bigger talk that we chatted about, and that is why this human fascination with bears. I mean, it goes. We'll get into the teddy bears and the cuddly aspect of it. But why are we in literature, in our plays? What do we think is the fascination with bears, John? We'll start with you on that.
Well, it's fascinating to me because for such a large, fearsome animal, humans tend to infantilize them and also neutralize them by making them figures of fantasy. We go all the way back to Goldilocks and the Three Bears, obviously. But then it goes further than that. What's my list here? There's Little Bear, if you remember that wonderful children's story. Adorable bears. There's Gentle Ben, which was a very popular TV show. Yogi Bear and Boo Boo, I'm sure you all remember them. Then there's even an upcoming animated series that's going to be coming on Tubi coming up called Breaking Bear. Which is about three bears who discover a meth lab in the woods.
No.
I'm not joking.
Yes.
Yes. The three voices of the three bears, they're all siblings. It's Brendan Fraser as the big dumb bear, who's also a sex addict. There's Sarah Michelle Gellar as the prissy one, and Josh Gad as the little prim and adorable little one, who once he takes a bit of meth turns into a crazy psycho. He's the kind of Jekyll Hyde bear. So that's coming up. And of course, you can't leave out Paddington Bear or Winnie the Pooh, who, can you get any cuter?
And Rupert Bear as well.
Rupert. Yes, and the bear in Brideshead Revisited. It goes on and on and on. Yeah. But and none of them are, killers. Shakespeare's bear is the only one who's a real killer. Who's really violent. So I don't know why that is exactly, why people have done that through the years. It's fascinating. But I think it certainly shows in how people treat, people act crazy around real bears, as Marty will attest to. They'll walk up to them. They think they can come up to them and feed them. They bring their kids. Look at the cute bear. Fascinating. Yeah. People are stupid.
If you take anything away from today, take that.
That's the big note.
Well, so Marty, we chatted. If anyone's seen some of these documentaries, one is called Grizzly Man, I think, of an individual who wanted to teach us that bears were good creatures, and it didn't end up well for him or his partner, I think. Yeah, let's talk a bit about that, Marty, because you of course have gone up into these bear dens because you know what you're doing. How does that differ with some of these people that have tried to go rogue on this?
Yeah, Timothy Treadwell was a troubled person.
Yeah. So Timothy Treadwell was the one who did this. Is it called Grizzly Man? Do I have the right? Yeah.
The documentary, yeah. And he was killed by a brown bear in Alaska. He thought that he could befriend them and so on. So it didn't, you're right, it didn't end well. I just want to comment about this sort of fascination aspect. Stephen Jay Gould published a paper in Natural History in the late 70s called The Mickey Mouse Syndrome. And in the paper, he goes through the Disney personification of Mickey Mouse, which originally was a very adult rat-like creature, and it eventually ends up with Mickey Mouse with a very rounded head, large ears, and so on. And when you look at pictures of bear cubs, they are the same. Young bears are, very rounded heads. They have large eyes. They have relatively large ears. And Stephen Jay Gould's point was that that's what human babies are like. And so, an image of a young animal that is very much like a human baby creates this feeling in us of wanting to mother or parent this young there. So I think that's part of the fascination that we have of bears. And then, as John mentioned, there's also the other side of bears as being dangerous. And so we are fascinated by this contrast between, feeling very safe around them as young animals and then the danger of them as adults. I think that's part of it.
Just stepping into the real bear world as you've done for so many years, has our approach in terms of studying them changed over the years? Have we learned in your time in it? Has that evolved and learned a lot more about bears and stuff we didn't know 30 years ago, I guess?
Yeah, certainly American black bears. Nobody tries to go into the den of a grizzly because that would not end well.
And grizzlies are, when we're ranking the hierarchy of danger bears, grizzlies would be at the top of that.
Under polar bears?
So grizzlies are, I think, more dangerous because they're so unpredictable. Polar bears, you're right, Cal, they're potentially dangerous, but they are predictable in their behavior. You can read their behavior. Same thing with black bears. When I first started working on black bears, I didn't know a whole lot about their behavior, and I realized I needed to. So there was a small landfill close to my research camp, and I would go there in the afternoons and induce charges from these large bears by approaching them within their comfort zone. So I learned after a while what their comfort zone was. I learned that I could induce a charge, but along the way, I learned that there's a whole suite of displays that they use. They start out with maybe a subtle change of posture, maybe they turn and look at you, maybe they swat the ground. The whole suite of displays that they use against other bears to discourage other bears from getting closer. And if we learn what those are, we can learn not to get so close to a bear that it's inside its discomfort zone, if you will. So
And when you say induce a charge, just for clarity, that means you're challenging, you're pressing and trying to provoke essentially an attack.
exactly, and so when those bears charged, and I can tell you, a 500 or 600 pound male bear charging you is pretty intimidating.
Yeah.
But what?
Who knew? We have the answer to that question now. Thank you, Martyn.
Come on, Marty, it's not that bad.
But what I did learn was that they are indeed bluff charges, and so they will stop at a very close distance, and a bear at groin level, having just charged with a cloud of dust and like this, is pretty intimidating. But
I would not call that bluff, but
No,
yeah.
no, that's
But it is a language they use with each other, and so they use that same language with us. And so certainly, personally, I learned this whole suite of displays, and I have a whole set of photographs that I would use in public talks where I would try to teach people that you need to respond to these early signals and not get as far as a later signal.
Yeah, right.
Because maybe it won't stop.
And we'll get in more because I want specifics about how to avoid getting eaten by a bear. But some of those things what I would know in my rudimentary knowledge is that you're not going to get near a mother bear with children. That's a basic one. But there probably some of those key things would be getting anywhere near a den or a home, I would imagine. When you talk about kind of charging their territory,
Right.
What is that?
Well, it's really interpersonal distance. So all the signals they're sending out to other bears or to us are back off. I'm not comfortable with you being that close. So please pay attention to the signal I'm sending.
There was just one thing I was thinking about in terms of the way we relate to bears. I don't know if anyone remembers the plague destroyed my idea of time, but I think this was before COVID. There was a bear in the United States that got into a bunch of beer. 2 different brands of beer. I can't remember the exact circumstances, but it tried both. It preferred one, and boy, it drank a lot of beer. That was one drunk bear. And of course, it's like, oh, it's the spokes beer bear. Now, because it expressed a preference, and it did this funny thing that humans do. There was just a few weeks ago a bear that broke into a place and took some strawberry ice cream. That was all it wanted. Didn't make him left. So it's these things that I think make it very easy for us to anthropomorphize them because hey, we like beer and ice cream,
Yeah.
And not a lot of animals do that or even have the capacity to do that. I think it's one of the things that leads us to identify with.
I mean, so when also looking at intellect of bears, anyone can chime in, but Marty, this is they are a very intelligent animal, right? On the hierarchy of intellects.
Yeah, absolutely. Bears and dogs, and they're in the same family, carnivores. And they're highly intelligent, phenomenal problem-solving abilities. I mentioned on our Zoom call that we spent decades trying to develop bear-proof garbage containers. The best that we've done is bear-resistant.
Yeah, they take it as a challenge, right?
Yeah, and they're very agile with their paws. So there's one brand of garbage container that is strongly bear-resistant. It has a latch underneath. You have to turn your hand this way to pull that latch. But some bears learn to, even though it's not first nature for them, they learn to turn that paw and get hold of that latch. And so, highly intelligent and amazing problem solving. And they have to problem solve in their natural environment. They have to learn where seasonal foods are. They have to learn to navigate back to those areas in subsequent years because there might be food there. And the adult females pass that knowledge on to their cubs. They take them to those areas. They show them what good foods, what acceptable foods are that won't endanger them, and so on. So highly intelligent.
I tree planted in my youth up north and left at our camp my cooler out overnight and came back and there were jaw marks in it. I still have it somewhere of a bear that tried to, but the size of the jaw, I was just fascinated. And the lid was off. So they did figure out after trying to bite through it how to untwist it. Yeah, so it's not. Kel, let's talk. I want to make sure I get in about a bit of literature and bears. And so, the teddy bear, near and dear to my heart. I had a teddy bear collection as a youth, and I was interviewed by some guy named Keanu Reeves on here in Stratford. So when I was 12, he was hosting a show called Going Great. And this is before the Bill and Ted days, and he came and interviewed a 12-year-old Graham Abbey about my teddy bear collection. So if anyone, and I gather it made it to the Tonight Show because it's such a silly interview. Keanu Reeves was on there. So if you want to Google Keanu Reeves teddy bears, you'll see a young Graham Abbey talking about his teddy bear collection.
It is adorable, just to say.
I know I'm very adamant in it that I'm like, I don't play with them. I just collect them. I'm a very serious teddy bear collector. But I like to think, I know when I was young, that was the beginning of my imagination as an artist and actor, that I was making these inanimate things. They all had personalities, as we do with our toys and dolls and bears. But the teddy bear, Kel, tell me a bit. I think I know the story. Refresh for anyone. So it was a hunting trip of Teddy Roosevelt,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt, who of course was famous, or if you like, infamous, as a very kind of very model of machismo, as we call it now, and was a great outdoorsman and was very involved in what we now call conservation and so forth. He, I think there are a couple of different stories about it, but I think he may have shot a bear. Actually, that's what started.
Well, I think he refused to kill it.
Oh, maybe that. No, you're right. That's right.
Right. There was a famous picture where he wouldn't kill it. It was held captive.
Yes, and let's go with that because I don't want to think about him killing a bear and then us loving teddy bears. But no, that's right. And so the teddy bear, became this thing that was very much identified with him in quite a bizarre way when you think of Teddy Roosevelt and think of teddy bears. But it just, I don't know why it took off, and I don't know if anyone knows. It just, as I think of as if anybody here is familiar with social media where, you have bears or large animals, people will say things like, if not friend, why friend-shaped? My toxic trait is that I'd be trying to pet that thing. It just automatically locked in with us.
And I think, as I have it right, he refused to shoot it, and the picture went viral as it was in those days. And there was some guy in a shop somewhere who thought that was very cool and created this stuffed animal and put it in a shop called the Teddy Bear, because Teddy Roosevelt refused to shoot it. And then, of course, at that same time, Steiff in Germany was creating bears, so it kind of caught fire a little bit. Winnie the Pooh. Tell me about Winnie the Pooh. Has a Canadian root to it, right, Kel?
Yes. Winnie the Pooh became a mascot of a unit in the First World War that ended up I believe in the zoo in Winnipeg. Here,
yes, and it was a real bear.
Yes, it was a real bear.
That was brought by a Canadian soldier, right? Yeah.
And in fact, you can see a number of, this is interesting too, for whatever reason, there are various pictures that exist of soldiers and bears in the First and Second World War. I guess a bear was a popular mascot, not necessarily meaning that, a regiment or whatever would bring the bear along with it. But again, that identification, young bears who were, of course, I'm guessing, Marty, less dangerous than adult bears, and the soldiers feeding them and so forth. And yes, that's how Winnie the Pooh started. So it was a Canadian bear who was a mascot in the First World War, and of course A.A. Milne took it up from there. And
because I think his child saw it in the zoo,
Christopher
right?
Robin,
and Christopher Robin, and there it goes.
So the cub actually came from White River in Northern Ontario.
There you go.
So the Winnipeg Rifles were
Winnipeg
going through on train to Quebec, where they were going to train, and there was a veterinarian along with them because, of course, they had horses, and he saw this cub on the platform in White River, and a trapper had it for sale. So it would have been, I think it was in August it was picked up, so it would have been about 7 or 8 months old. So only about 10 or 15, maybe 15 pounds, so quite small.
Yeah.
And then it got bigger.
Absolutely. And ultimately, they were told they couldn't take it to France, so, which is how, when they were sent to France, they couldn't take it. So that's how it ended up in the Whipsnade Zoo.
In the zoo and became a
Right.
literature
Became,
legend. I mean, this notion then, I mean, both those stories of Roosevelt and this Canadian story of Winnie the Pooh about kind of protecting and saving a bear leads to that idea again of that protective spirit, right? I mean, this is a case of humans protecting a bear, but so much of this is about the attraction of bears protecting us. Kel, you mentioned some books, famous books, that one of them is Canadian, that I think in the Wikipedia says it's the most controversial book ever written in Canada, right?
Probably true. It's Marion Engel's Bear, which some of you may remember because it created quite a stir when it was published in about 76, and it's about a person who has a romantic relationship with a bear. And that doesn't get written about too often. And again,
I mean, we had the goat last year.
Yes,
here.
yes, there was
so
the
we're
goat,
not,
that's right. And,
right.
And but again, a bear. There presumably there's a reason why it's a bear, and it's just saying not a goat, because a bear does seem so anthropomorphized to us already. That is so human-like. And of course, more recently, this isn't a literary example exactly, but we were discussing the very popular series, The Bear. Which is about, of course, a man running a restaurant, trying not to go mad and trying to deal with his family. It's about several things. But early on in that series, Carmy, the chef, starts having nightmares. He finds himself waking up in the middle of the night. He's cooking. He actually sets a fire accidentally. And you can see just briefly in an episode or two this image of a bear in one of his nightmares. It's never explored farther than that. But of course, he goes on to call his restaurant The Bear. And I personally think that's a brilliant thing on the part of the people who deal with the show, is that it's this amorphous. I mean, we know what a bear is. We know the danger it represents, but it's this amorphous thing somewhere in Carmy's unconscious that's driving him. And I'm wondering if we're ever going to hear more about it, in the series and what it means.
I always thought that, for me, that the mother figure, who is so psychotic,
She is, yeah,
but she's very much like a vicious mother bear figure. So I'm wondering if that's part of what he's dreaming.
That's Jamie
about.
Lee Curtis, and
Jamie Lee Curtis is remarkable.
Yeah.
And they made a film of the bear, the first one, about the romantic relationship.
Oh yes, no, I'm aware. I've never
haven't
seen that.
seen
No,
it.
I haven't seen it, but yes,
Now I
I'm
have
aware
to
of that.
rent it.
Yeah. There's a big surge in demand for Marion Engel's Bear.
Right.
What happened?
Suddenly we're all renting it.
And of course, there's so many areas to talk about, but if we get into folklore and mythology, of course, bears are big in Aboriginal cultures and many others. Russian folklore is big with bears. I don't know if there's anyone that wants to touch on that area a little bit. John, we chatted a bit.
A little bit. I mean, I think it's interesting that, Hermione says that she's the daughter of the Emperor of Russia, and so there is that connotation. There's been productions that have been set, a rather famous RSC one with Anthony Sher that was set in Russia. But, the mythology one, the most interesting that I found example was a John Barton directed production at the RSC where it was set in Lapland, and the bear was a shaman figure who came in with a bear mask, an obvious mask. And instead of killing Antigonus, he came to Antigonus and took his arm and walked him gently off and took him to the nether regions. That's a fascinating theory, isn't it? I mean, I guess they cut the shoulder blade.
They cut the shoulder blade, but I tell you a story that I tell. So I was directing Winter's Tale. It's the very first thing I'd ever directed, and I was completely intimidated on my very first day of direction. Michael Hart is here, right? Who was in the room. It's lovely to have you here, and you know the story I'm going to tell. So I had Brent Carver playing Antigonus, who was my hero, and I thought, what am I going to tell Brent Carver? So we had this little stage set up over in the studio, and he had a swaddling cloth and a lantern, and I said, basically, go. Like I didn't know. We had done the work, but I'm like, here it is, Brent. You know the scene. You're bringing the baby to the shore, and I, to this day, it was the greatest piece of theater I had ever seen, and very few people saw it except Michael Hart, myself, and one other person. Michael was stage managing, and I don't know what Brent did, but as Brent could so often do, he touched genius. But it reminds me of that because what he did was this incantation. He used Antigonus's lines about the storm, and it became a chant and a physical movement that only Brent could do. And he ended it. We were in tears. I was in tears, and all I could do was I said, let's take coffee, because I didn't know. And I walked out with my associate director, Brad, and I said to him, what the heck did we just see? And he said, genius. But and I never asked Brent to do it again, but it touched, because I didn't know, you couldn't repeat it. It was so magical, but it was really otherworldly and transcendent. But it was something about the spirituality of the moment, and he almost became the bear, chanting around this child and protecting it. It was fascinating. It was fascinating. Someday you can direct it on stage one day.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, find me another Brent Carver.
Find you another Brent Carver. That's what
that will not
everyone's
happen.
looking for. Yeah.
I had mentioned earlier when we were talking to The Terror, which is a thick, very good novel,
Yes.
and was also turned into a mini-series with Jared Harris and other people. And it is a fictionalized account of the ill-fated Franklin expedition. And because, of course, there's always speculation about exactly what went wrong there, in this telling, there is a monstrous, otherworldly figure of a polar bear that's only shown a couple of times. Again, very restrained, but an indigenous woman who has come to one of the ships is... One of the crew sees her interacting with it, and it's now in this case it's absolutely a malevolent being, and it's there to make clear to the Franklin expedition that they shouldn't be there, and eventually they weren't. But it's a really very impressive,
Yeah, it's
both in the book and
fantastic.
in the series, representation.
That's
of
a
that kind.
great series. If
Yeah,
you
it
haven't
really
seen
is.
it,
It's-
really
What is it? What's
good.
the name?
It's called The Terror.
Terror.
Named after one of the ships, one of Franklin's ships. Yeah.
Just super.
I want to make sure, mostly for me, that I don't get eaten by a bear, Marty. I want to get into the real specifics of what we're to do. So I see these videos online of bears. I don't know why maybe because I was looking up bears, and now I get videos of bears, of people, and in the distance these bears are kind of stalking and following these people, and I always think, what would I do? And we're told, I don't know what we're doing. We're told don't run. I think we're told climb a tree, but bears can move fast. We're told to act big. So I could see an idiot of myself trying to do this and getting swallowed by a bear. I'm sure this varies, Marty. This is general based on the bear you're encountering. But what are the, if we're not in your world and trying to provoke these things, if we happen to be camping up in Algonquin and run into a bear, what do we do?
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff out there, as you said. Look big, try to talk to the bear, don't make eye contact, all that kind of stuff. And frankly, most of that's a waste of time.
I thought so.
And if Antigonus had bear spray with him, he would have survived.
So tell me about what is bear? What is it? It just, they don't like it. It's a bbad smell. Is that what it is?
Well, it's an extreme irritant. There's capsaicin in it, from hot peppers.
Okay.
And it's legally it's at a certain concentration, 8 or 10%, depends on the product. But essentially, the hope is that the bear will inhale this, and there'll be an intense irritant to the respiratory system, but also to the eyes. And I've used it, and it is a phenomenal irritant. I've also, unfortunately, inhaled it myself and whatever. For men in the audience, what I would suggest is you ever use it, make sure you wash your hands before you have a pee afterwards.
Good advice.
But
you're getting very practical stuff here at the forum. This is not.
yeah, but seriously, our advice to most people is carry bear spray with you. don't have it in your pack, have it on your belt,
Okay.
have it available, know how to use it. And if you encounter a bear, never mind all the stuff about look big, and avoid eye contact. Just get ready to use your bear spray.
And irritating a bear is not high on my list of things I'd like to do. Once you irritate said bear, then run.
Beat it.
Well, the bear will almost certainly leave.
Yeah, okay.
The published literature is that using bear spray is, effective in 95% or more of cases. Yeah. That's the message.
Is there in the rank of bears, we talked about grizzlies being bad. Is there are brown bears kind of friendly? I'm baiting you into.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So North American brown bears and Eurasian brown bears are the same species.
Okay.
But Eurasian brown bears seem to be, there are cases of them attacking people and killing people in some recent cases, but certainly they seem to be more benign. Serious incidents with grizzlies are generally surprise encounters. So, the advice to people is, don't hike in dense cover close to streams and where the noise of the stream might, for the bear, obscure its hearing so it doesn't hear you coming, so you end up in a surprise encounter. And grizzlies, especially female grizzlies with young, are flat out aggressive.
Yeah.
And they will be so. And the interpretation typically is that in an evolutionary context, brown bears in North America evolved out in the prairies or the areas where there are low trees, whereas brown bears in Europe, which is where North American brown bears came from, of course, across the Bering Strait.
The Bering Strait.
Well done.
Had to.
Well
sorry.
done.
Tend to have evolved in treed areas, and so the surprise encounters are less likely. So, so the messaging for grizzlies is if you are attacked by a grizzly, to play dead, because
So that holds.
that for grizzlies.
Good to know. Okay, for grizzlies.
Not American black bears.
Yeah.
American black bears, you should fight back with whatever you've got.
Okay.
But for grizzlies, and so that's where some of the messaging and some of the videos gets confusing to people, because they go through an hour-long video and they say, well, are we still talking about grizzlies, or are we talking about black bears now? So our message, we try to simplify our messaging to get your bear spray ready.
Yeah.
If you happen to be in a surprise encounter with a grizzly where you're attacked, then play dead, because it seems that once grizzlies think that they've eliminated the threat, that they say, okay, threat's eliminated, and away we go. I've chewed that threat up a little bit, and the thing that threatened me is injured and is hurt.
Now I can walk away.
But now I can walk away.
Yeah.
So people have survived grizzly attacks by playing dead.
Yeah. They're not in it for the feast. It's just an
Correct.
aggressive.
Yeah, it's not a predatory interaction. Whereas with polar bears and with black bears, if it's a serious attack like that, it's very likely a predatory attack. So it's very different, and that's why you should fight back.
You've spent time in the Arctic. Polar bears are the populations are at risk. It's happening up there. It's a big topic, but touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, at risk due to climate change.
Yeah.
Certainly in Hudson Bay where I worked, bears are on land now for 30 days or longer more than they were in the past. And when they're on land, they're fasting. They're living off their stored body fat. And so it's a cumulative thing. If they go back to the ice in the fall in poorer condition than they did last year, the chances are they're going to come off the ice next summer in poorer condition than they came off the ice the year before. Now, there's obviously variation in there, and there's variation among years, and some years are okay. Last year was okay for polar bears in Hudson Bay. They came off late. They came off in August, and so they had an extra month, right? But the trend is pretty gloomy in some parts of the Canadian Arctic.
Mm-hmm. So you say, as that ice diminishes, they spending more time on land means they're not feeding, basically, right?
Exactly. And the flip side, of course, is that they had less time on ice to actually hunt. And so that's where it's this kind of double jeopardy situation for
Yeah.
polar bears in some parts of their range. The area that's affected worst is the area around Svalbard, north of Norway. That Barents Sea area, the bears are in real trouble there. Recently, it's interesting. They actually recovered from an overhunting situation in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. The population recovered, but in recent times, in the last 20 years, with the rapid decline in sea ice, that population is going to be in big trouble.
And so, is hunting any part of this at all? I mean, I guess the combination of the environmental factors and hunting is a bad combination.
Yeah. So the biggest threat is climate change.
Yeah.
Harvest is a threat, but in Canada, it's frankly well managed. And layered on top of that is that Cree or Inuit have either treaty rights to harvest or they have land claim rights to harvest. And harvest, especially for the Inuit, is a huge cultural feature. Polar bear meat is also part of the country food for Inuit, so it's an important part of the diet. When you look at the price of groceries in northern stores and so on, you realize that country meat remains important to the Inuit, especially. Also to the Cree in Ontario and Quebec, although the Cree historically didn't have a tradition of eating polar bear meat themselves. They used it for their dogs when they had dog sleds. So it's a little bit different tradition for the Cree than it is for the Inuit.
Outside of hunting for harvest, if we go to hunting for sport, is that being clamped down for the most part?
Not so much clamped down, but in parts of Nunavut and Northwest Territories where a sport harvest is allowed, it's part of the quota system. So let's say a small community had a quota of 10 tags, and at the Hunters and Trappers Association meeting, somebody puts up his hand and said, I'd like to have the opportunity to offer a sport hunt because, it's a pretty substantial economic input. If that permission is given, that tag is removed from the quota. So that with a sport hunt, there's no additional polar bears that are killed. There are polar bears that are killed that might lean more towards big adult males, which can be a bit of an issue and needs to be managed.
Let me get into some of these. These are good. Some of them make me laugh about my teddy bear collection. This is for Kel. In brackets, it says PhD lady.
I think I know who wrote this.
Can you give us any other actual or symbolic use of bears in Renaissance or early literature? This says Spenser, Fairy Queen, Milton, Chaucer, perhaps biblical bears. Looking for context.
Actually, I probably could, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to recall them right now. There were bears, of course, occasionally used in heraldry, which isn't exactly the same thing, but although often they're muzzled because they weren't native wild animals in England. There are, but I'm not going to be able to pull any out of my failing memory right at the moment. I'm sorry. Guy, was that you? No?
No.
Oh, all right.
No.
Sorry.
And this particular person asked a question, which I love, says, P.S. I played Paddington in a musical suit at a mall long ago.
Oh, my.
So
Well, I can certainly, if you can kind of give me an hour to think about it, I can certainly email you some, but I can't just at the moment.
Does anybody know the Anishinaabe view of bears? They have a bear clan, and obviously in this territory, the Anishinaabe is important. Anybody have any reference to that? No? Does the person who asked this have any notion of that? No? No?
It is an important animal for members of the bear clan.
Yes.
And members of the bear clan do not hunt black bears.
Yeah. Yeah, I was reading a bit. I'm going to get this wrong, Cal, but that the bear was on the shield of one of the great families back in Shakespeare's time, and one of the patrons of Shakespeare's company was from the family that used that shield, which is some connection to.
Yeah, I know the one you're thinking of. Again, but they weren't as prevalent as things like boars, for example, which were wild in England. But yes, they were obviously megafauna. They're very powerful, large animals, so they could occasionally be used in things like that.
Alaskan natives who hunt grizzlies in Alaska, to use the meat, skin the bear out, and so on. They take the skull, they clean the skull off, and they bury the skull facing west. So that's part of their culture, and it's part of their belief system that they should do that, out of respect for the bear.
This is a good one. We've talked about lots of types of bears, but not panda bears. So in this particular question, but we can probably get larger on this, but wants to talk about China loaning pandas to other countries to improve international relations. We had panda bears, I think, at the Toronto Zoo. I don't know if they're still there. Is that, in the real bear world, Marty, any connection to pandas? They're the cuddliest of all, aren't they?
Yeah, they look like it.
You're going to ruin panda bears for me, too.
Yeah, it's sort of been a bit of a debate in conservation that China says that we're doing this to improve conservation of wild bears and so on, but I have to watch what I say here. But I remember I had a tour. Friends of mine were vets at the Toronto Zoo and took me on a back background tour, and it cost them $1 million a year for food for the bears, because they had to fly it up, every couple of days from Florida, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a huge moneymaker for the Chinese government. Whether it actually does anything for conservation, I don't know. I mean, I guess you could argue that it raises awareness in North America for the conservation status of pandas, I guess. I don't know.
Are you familiar with Fat Bear Week, Martyn?
Yes.
Yes, because I think that's actually this week or last week.
It's around this time of year.
Because Fat Bear Week is this kind of, I guess, public relations exercise that in Alaska they go through, where people can actually vote based on footage that they find. This is the time when the bears are fattening up for winter, and they have individual numbers, and you can vote on your favorite fat bear. And there's a winner. It's an enormously popular thing.
Where is this?
This is in Alaska, but if you go online, Fat Bear Week, it makes the news repeatedly every single year, because people really get to, here's my feet. Sometimes they give them nicknames. Yeah. And this absolute unit of a bear, and it's a very popular thing. And I gather in Alaska it is seen as, because Alaska is so identified with grizzlies, as a way to kind of get people to appreciate them and how big they are. I suppose.
Yeah, and there are sites like McNeil River, for example, where people can go for bear viewing while the bears are feeding on salmon. And I think that, sites like that do a lot to raise awareness and raise information levels, I guess, of people about bears.
There's so many worlds of bears. It's kind of fascinating. It warrants a second forum. But we didn't talk about. I know we did in our Zoom, Cal, about bears in the circus, so for entertainment. And this question is, do we know when the circus stopped using bears as entertainment? Hopefully they have. I don't know. There's probably some circuses that still have them.
It would. There are also a lot of roadside attraction things still especially in the United States, where there's less regulation often about people keeping bears.
Yeah.
So I don't know about. I mean, it's been so long since I've even seen in North America a circus. You know what I mean? The circus in the traditional sense that we knew when we were kids. And obviously there are a lot more rules now, and just a real shift in sentiment, right? About people don't want to see large animals kind of demeaned by performing for them. So I don't know how the big circuses operate now, but there's certainly still a lot of shadier places that it's kind of like the Tiger King people where you could go and pet a tiger.
Yeah,
kind of
right.
thing.
That same. But presumably, this comes back to the intellect of bears, that they were used as entertainment because they could stand on their hind legs and
They were biddable. They're trainable. They were right. If you get
Yeah.
them young enough.
yeah.
Yeah, trained to ride bicycles and do all kinds of things. And
The Russian circus, you use
Yeah,
it
yeah,
quite a bit.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think
They
the
make
Russians
still-
probably
Yeah.
still do.
There's a culture in northern India, calendars that had dancing bears. Families would have dancing bears, and so they would find the maternity den of a sloth bear. They would light a fire at the entrance, and the smoke would drive the mother out, and then they would grab the cubs, and they raised those cubs, and they had them as dancing. So they were itinerant. They went around from village to village, and that's how they had a living. There was a conservation group called Wildlife SOS, run by a colleague of mine, that decided that this was, that they wanted to discourage this. And so what they did was, that very enlightened attitude was, they gave the senior member of this family, the father, a trade. So they trained them to be cobblers or to sew things and what have you. So they gave them a trade and were able to take the bear away. The bears were in pretty horrific conditions. They had, chains through their noses, and they had their teeth removed and claws removed and what have you.
When was this, Marty?
This is fairly recently.
Jeez.
So
There's a famous Canadian poem, "The Bear on the Delhi Road," about the
About-
dancing bears of India.
Right.
If anybody remembers that.
So anyway, so the Wildlife SOS have been pretty successful in retraining these families to have trades.
Another vocation.
Another
to
vocation,
stop that,
exactly.
yeah.
And so some of this is pretty recent,
Yeah.
where we still had dancing bears and bears in Russian circuses, whatever.
Do we see them at zoos much anymore? I suppose they are.
I would guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are polar bears, and you should see the polar bear exhibit at the Toronto Zoo. It's not bad.
And what do we think of that, Marty? Is that something I feel good about taking my kid to, or is it mixed?
Well,
They're treated well, but
yeah,
they're still
treated
in
well,
captivity.
absolutely, and they've got good veterinary care, and the exhibit space is actually quite large, and they have chilled water, so when it's hot here in July and August, they can actually get in and so on. But you're taking a highly intelligent animal, you're putting it in a small space where normally these animals would be wandering over the sea ice over thousands of kilometers. You're returning, so you see repetitive behavior, which is
So not dissimilar to this marine land stuff of taking something and putting it in a same thing with the mental aspect of that. For the,
Absolutely. It's probably not as bad as Marine Land. Marine Land was horrific.
Yeah.
But yeah, along those lines for sure.
And as bears are stuck in this confined environment, they their cognition would diminish and
Psychological issues.
Psychological
and that's
issues.
what the repetitive behavior is indicative of that. And not just bears. I mean, you've got
Sure. Yep.
cougars and lynx and all kinds of animals.
So when you see them pacing those pens, that's the same thing as those orcas swimming in circles. It's,
Yeah. So it's
Just one thing, though, that related to this, talking about bears being trainable and biddable, I was reading about some famous movie bears a few days ago, and one of them was doing an ad for Kleenex. It was a trained bear on Benbecula, which is on an island off the coast of Scotland. It got away, and it was gone for something like 24 days, and they finally found it swimming in the sea. And it had lost over 200 pounds. And this was a bear, I think a black bear of about 600 pounds. The reason it had lost weight when people on the island were very afraid of having their sheep and so forth stolen was because it was used to cooked meals. And it didn't want to eat this raw flesh. Like literally, it had become so used to this kind of thing that it was starving to death. And they got it back, and it then became some kind of a Kleenex spokesbear or something. But they did that, and the longer it lived with the people who owned it, the more human it became.
Well, and this is, gets to us awful human beings. Years ago, I used to do a lot of canoe tripping, and my last visit to Algonquin, which was, probably 20 years ago. But on our camp trip, there was a small fox who would just come and hang out on our, and at about 10 o'clock at night, a couple came from the next campsite and said, we were chased off by a bear. Can we come and hang by your fire? And they did. The story ends with us all around the fire. And as the fire died out and we all fell asleep, I woke up to the screams of this woman saying, there's a bear now on our site. And I, in a silly way, went to rescue my friend who was sleeping in the tent. By the time I turned around, my friends had taken the canoes and were halfway out in the lake. But I did see the bear, but it was not, again, I got quickly swimming out into the lake and it was rummaging around for food. But I take it in places like Algonquin, as we go and we leave food around, these animals get used to that, right? And that's a problem.
It's a huge problem. And it's a problem for the staff because, you say, well, why don't you just talk to people? But there's somebody new every weekend. And so, it's never ending. And often it's somebody new who needs to be informed. And, it's a huge problem. Absolutely.
And people keep leaving food on their doorstep and on their porches.
That's right. Yeah.
This happens all the time. You see videos.
Or they have a
all
picnic
the time.
shelter and they say, well, I zipped the picnic shelter up. That should have been good.
Yeah.
Keep it up.
Yeah.
So Graham, sure, it's a huge problem, and it's an issue for park staff to manage. And the safety worry is that occasionally those bears do injure people. Not often, but occasionally, and sometimes it's that the people's got too close, and so the bear swats them because this is my cooler now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, we talk. I started talking about bears at that liminal thing about that kind of threshold between civilized society but as we impinge on their territory, as we do, I'm always interested in how we define these invasive species because in effect we're out in those parks in their territory and often doing stuff that provokes them, as you say, and not respecting them, I guess, in those territories.
Right.
Yeah. Marty, have you seen the bear farm in Michigan? They're a refugee for orphaned, injured bears. Do you know of this?
I'm not sure what one the questioner is referring to. I have seen one with a number of very large bears.
Anyone want to clarify who that? Oswald Bear Farm in Michigan. Okay. And this is for bears that have been injured or presumably, right? Are there lots of those around?
I'm not sure if I was at the same one you're referring to, ma'am, so I can't really comment.
But there are farms around that are good places that are helping bears get back to the.
Are they rescuing them from roadside attractions and things like that? I know there's some places that will try to rehab bears, but many of them, if I understand correctly, can't be returned to the wild because they weren't
Right.
wilded enough to begin with.
Yeah, because they've got so many negative behavior patterns, so they can't be, so they're rehabilitated in perhaps places like you're referring to, ma'am, I'm not sure, but they really can't be released into the wild again.
Stepping back for a second to theater, John, our world, the non-PhD world.
Yes.
This says the pursuit of the bear in this current year's production of Winter's Tale is relatively subdued, which yes, relatively it is, compared to some examples cited. How was the choice made? John, you've directed this play and made your own choice. I think sometimes, and I can't speak for Anthony, I wasn't in on the choice. Anyone who's seen our show, it's done with light. There isn't an actual person in a bear suit. I've been in Winter's Tale twice as an actor at the festival. I was in Brian Bedford's production many years ago playing Florizel. And in that one, there was a fine actor named Mark Karapiak who was in a bear suit. The festival does have an amazing bear suit for anyone who cares, but it's quite realistic, and it was built, I think, for that production, and it was, you really saw the bear cross. I think sometimes, and John, you can speak to this, it's some directors want to make it purely symbolic. I think in other cases, there's sometimes with us, it becomes so overwhelming, the exit pursued by a bear, that they make T-shirts and stuff about it, and it sometimes for some directors has very little to do with the play. I mean, it's a weird thing. This stage direction has become famous, but some directors I want to I'm not saying that's what Anthony was doing, but I want to minimize it because it's just part of the story, but there are bigger things. When you've directed this play, how many times?
I've done it twice.
Okay.
And both times I did what Anthony did.
Well, there you go.
So he must have seen them. He did.
stole
No,
it
it was with a sound cue of roaring and thunder and
why
the shadow.
Why,
of
if
the
we
bear.
can call it subduing it a little bit in your mind, why?
Well, I just think that it was more effective. I didn't want the moment to stand out. However, I do have to mention that I've seen the play itself like 12, 13 times, and 2 of them were remarkable. I mean, but what they did was you didn't think about the rest of the production. One of them was an RSC one where the set was Leontes' library, and he had these towering bookcases that were filled with supposedly 1,000 books. And when he defied the oracle, the bookcases tilted over, and thousands of books fell onto the stage floor. And when the bear came in, he burst through the doors at the back of the set, and it was an 8-foot-tall puppet made out of pages from books. Well, that kind of stopped the show.
Oh, yeah.
And,
What's the point of doing the second
You know what
act?
else happens? And then the most dramatic was a Terry Hans production, which was actually a great production with Jeremy Irons as Leontes. But in this production, there was a huge stage-full white polar bear rug throughout the whole first act, with the head near the footlights and the paws. And at the point with Antigonus, this entire rug rose up, filling the entire stage, arms out, the eyes glowing blue, the mouth open, red, and it came in. It was an amazing, who knows what tech was like, and it came down and swallowed Antigonus up into the mouth, and then the paws came over, and then the whole thing sank on the stage elevator into the floor.
Well, that's it reminds me, as my father used to use the quote and saying, well, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the rest of the play?
Exactly. Thank God it was Jeremy Irons playing Leontes. It was incredible. I mean, I'll never forget that moment.
Yeah.
It was fabulous. But and it really did work in terms of the production.
Yeah.
The other one didn't work at all because the rest of the production was turgid and awful. But
How do you really feel? But one thing I'll say, and I love your thoughts on it, is that it is exit pursued by a bear. And what I love, David Collins, who does it this year, is that there is an aspect to Antigonus luring the bear,
of course,
to that. So because the pursuit is as much anything about actually seeing the bear, or this symbolic bear, that it's about the fact that he leads him away from the child.
Absolutely. The most important thing is this character, who is a really lovely and warm and this voice of sanity and the insanity of the first half of the play, sacrifices himself for that baby. He's already taken this journey, which is amazing at his late age. I mean, how he even survives the ship and the storm and the wreck. Yeah. But that he sacrifices himself is just, that's what it's really about.
It's interesting in his fit of psychosis, Leontes, when he says, enjoins him to do that task, says, what would you do to save? He uses the word save, It is, so and indeed he does, but there's no guarantee with that crazy plan that anybody's going to save the child, but he tasks him with saving him and her, and he does.
And much as I like bringing in Hermione as a vision figure who saves her child, or walking Antigonus off, I still prefer to see Antigonus make the sacrifice. Well, that's what Shakespeare intends.
And what's fascinating, it goes by us a little bit, but Antigonus says she came to me as a spirit. Well,
yes.
Whatever you may believe, but she's not effectively dead. So there, it's really interesting what Shakespeare was playing with. That a lot of that, all of it, is inside Antigonus.
Yeah. It is one of the great moments, though.
It is.
I mean, and anyone who knows the play waits to see what's going to happen.
I know, moment. And buys the T-shirt.
Yes, I only bought it for this.
I have it as well, so I'm.
Oh, okay.
This is a good one, probably for somebody with a PhD. Linguistics believe the word bear comes from Germanic term the brown one, as part of a superstition to avoid invoking the presence of the bear. This strikes me as similar to avoiding saying Mackers, the Scottish play. Can you speak to superstitions around bears? Are there superstitions around Winter's Tale?
Not that I know of. I will note one of my favorite things about bears is that, Arctic, the Arctic and the Antarctic. Arctic means bears. Antarctic means no bears. The idea that this vast area would have been kind of, well, there are bears here. And by the time we got down there, it's phew, no bears. Leopard seals, that's a problem, but no bears. I don't know. I've never heard that before, and of course it may be so. But a lot of these types of theories do tend to be they're very conjectural. Marty, do you know more about that? That's
superstition.
No, not that
I
one.
was trying to think if
my
there's
PhD is in linguistics.
with witches or there's anything like that, and I can't think of.
Well, I mean, obviously the Mackers has so many those superstitions come from so many areas. Many of them are quite practical, and that is that because that play was often produced. It was always a popular, big-selling play. So when the company was producing it, it was often when the plague was happening, and they needed to make some fast money. So it became associated with badness because whenever you were putting on Mackers, you were in trouble. I'm not saying that about the Stratford Festival at all, but because of its popularity. And then, of course, there's the witches, there's the rhythm of the language and all of that.
But lots of animals are mentioned in that, but not
yes,
bears.
They are. Yes, they are.
I don't think there are any bear references.
I laugh. I wanted to get this joke in because I'm like, what are animals in Shakespeare? And I have a line in Winter's Tale where I say, break open the seals and read. And so I get seals in as well. It's bad. I'm a dad. I'm allowed to do it. Yeah.
The only other real mention of bears in Shakespeare, to the best of my knowledge, is in Merry Wives, when Falstaff boasts about having seen, it might be Sackerson actually, and makes up something about how he.
And there's a bear reference in As You Like It this year. It's Orlando talking about how his brother treats him, right? So something to do with like a bear. But I don't know any superstitions with Winter's Tale. It's left to Mackers. Let me read this one here. Knowing that the last two acts are a Shakespearean comedy, this is a reference to Winter's Tale. Do you personally believe that the stage direction, the physical presence of a bear, lends to the bear being a protective spirit or a representation of the wild chaos of Bohemia? That's interesting. I mean, we chatted a little bit about that, John, that it represents that threshold between two very different plays.
Right.
And the bear sits at that threshold.
Yeah. Of course, then the last act is not really a laugh fest.
No, it's not.
But
no.
as you well know. But I think that is a really important part of the transitional thing. And in fact, bears have turned up in Bohemia. There, in one production, Autolycus brought a bear to the sheep shearing.
Yes, yeah.
Which is fun, and it was a dancing bear. So
and you mentioned before we started what you did with Mamilius.
Mamilius! Yes, I had Mamilius carry his teddy bear. Which he was an adorable, sweet kid, and he talked to it and played with it while his parents were falling apart.
And did you bring the bear back as an object?
I did, because Mamilius in my production was in it a lot, and he actually during the trial was present. He climbed to the top of a very tall white ladder with his bear and sat and watched from above. And when he defied the oracle, all he did was climb down the ladder and exit.
We had many debates in our hall because I liked leaving Mamilius in as long as possible.
And then I brought him back at the end.
You did similar to this year's.
Leontes was in a freeze frame with his hand up, and Mamilius came in with the bear and walked over to his father and looked at him and touched his hand, and that was the end.
And the bear was there
with him. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I think it might. I don't want to be a downer here, but I think in terms of Shakespeare himself and Shakespeare's audience, the notion of the bear as as representing much other than menace I don't think that would be
Probably.
an easy argument to make, because again the notion that English people would have had at the time of bears would have been of a dangerous animal, and often an animal of abjection, that is dogs are having a go at it. There wasn't really that tradition of the mama bear type thing. They
Right.
wouldn't have had a
It's just interesting to me. I mean, it's just fascinating to me. This goes back to the beginning. Good place to go for the end. Of him treating it so tragically and so horrifically with Antigonus, and seconds later making a joke out of it.
yes.
That
yes.
is really
Interesting.
fascinating to me. That's great.
That's that real,
Yes, and then
real-
coming back with Autolycus saying his shoulders out, it extends the...
and that young shepherd usually gets a lot of laughs.
Yeah,
talking
no,
about this slaughter,
This horrible death.
this horrible death. It
Yeah.
is just.
But of course, it's such a heartrending scene, Antigonus's scene, that too, it's
Absolutely.
like let's
Comic
have a tiny
relief.
bit of comic relief.
Oh, yeah.
then have-
Yeah, and it's not, he stuck it into the statue scene too, with the auntie saying she wasn't as wrinkled or there's
Yes.
little things about that. Well, we're almost out of time. There were lots of questions. My bear collection, I still do have my bears.
I love it.
And in fact, I was approached by, I'm going to forget her name. I got a message on Instagram saying, are you the Graham Abbey of the bear collection? I thought, I'm not responding to this one. I don't know who. And finally I did politely and said, yeah, that's me. Anyway, this woman whose name I happened to Google, who has a Pulitzer Prize, who's often on CNN, Ruth Goodwin something. She was an intern with Teddy Roosevelt. She's a very, very famous woman, and wants to do a repeat interview with Keanu and I years later as part of an anniversary of Teddy
how
Roosevelt's. I don't know if she's a very busy woman, so I wrote her. I'm like, are you? So I don't know if it will happen, but I may reprise my bears. But they're near and dear to my heart. Thank you all. It's just been really a pleasure from moment one. It's such a great category and such a lovely mix of stories and intellect on this. It's been a great joy. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Graham, as well, for very skillfully moderating. Thank you all for your attention. We've checked. There are no bears in the lobby. You don't need to worry about that. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday.
Thank you all.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to keep up with the lively conversations and original performances on the Stratford Festival streaming service, Stratfest at Home. And for making it this far in the episode, enjoy 1 month for free. Visit stratfestathome.ca and enter code FREEMONTH. It takes you, our listeners, to make this possible. It also takes the support of our dear collaborators. Support for the Meighen Forum is generously provided by Kelly and Michael Meighen and the T.R. Meighen Family Foundation. Original score for the Everyday Forum podcast was provided by Hilary Adams. Production support is provided by the film production and distribution team at the Stratford Festival. That is coordinator Vilma Mancini and director Jenna McGaw. The Meighen Forum team is producing assistant Renata Hansen, associate coordinator James Hyatt, manager Gregory McLaughlin, and director Julie Miles. Special thanks to Mike Duncan, Greg Doherty, and Harper Charlton. Finally, thanks to artistic director Anthony Cimolino and executive director Anita Gaffney. From here in Stratford, Ontario, on the land of the Neutrals and the Anishinaabe, see you next time. Ba Mapi.